Last week, I started out talking about the CDC's finding in the case of the church in Washington State, where they had had two choir rehearsals and 53 of the members became ill, 3 were hospitalized, and 2 of them died. That's just one case dealing with choirs. So I thought this conversation was very necessary because many of us had not even pondered what should happen next with our church choirs or our university choirs. The CDC's finding was certainly disturbing. And even since our last conversation, we've seen churches where they met and the pastor passed away, members becoming ill. We have a situation that we need to talk about, and hopefully tonight we'll get some resolve. I will tell you, our virologist last week laid it on us, and it was probably the best science lesson I have ever heard. I understood it. It was very clear. It was understandable. We even had a doctor who commented how much misinformation is being shared and how even she understood the virologist and was checked on some of the things that she thought was true that actually was not true. So tonight we acknowledge you, Dr. Johnson Thompson, for sharing such great information and making it very plain for us. Our public health specialist shared with us last week and encouraged us to take care of our bodies by exercising and eating healthy, especially with the health disparities that we have in our community. She admonished us to attend to the details as it relates to our churches or facilities that we have to manage. If we're getting ready to reopen, we have to think about churches. Who's going to handle the offering? Will you really pass the plate? That should be, you must consider the dangers that may be before you. Wearing masks, the distance between members, all of those things need to be considered. Our ministers of music shared with us how virtual choirs have been working for them. Although very tedious, they have been using them. Some of the smaller churches are having just their praise teams to come out and record, and sometimes it's just the musician who's singing and playing. Then we had our music faculty who I think we all agree that we have a long road ahead of us as institutions begin to decide if they're going to open or partially or continue with online or remote teaching. We all have a road to look forward to, and hopefully we will come to a good realization about what should happen. I will tell you that at my institution, they've already decided to open, but there is consideration for online teaching as well as face-to-face. So we have great information coming forward tonight. We have a faith-based group that's going to share with us how their consulting firm will help churches to follow the CDC guidelines. And so you'll get to hear that information from Entity Strategy Group. I heard your request for pastors. At the end of the last conversation, my phone was blowing up with, please have the pastors. I think it's very important that they be a part of this conversation. Of course, they are the decision makers in many cases, and so they need to be a part of this conversation. And then there were many comments about the technology. People want to try the virtual choir. They're not sure if they have a small church. So we have our technology person on board. And then we have a singer-songwriter that's going to share with those people who are sitting around trying to figure out what they're going to do about the next gig. And also we have our academicians who will talk about what's going on in the universities. So as I said, I need you to share, like, give us thumbs up, hearts. So as we move forward, again, get your pencil and paper out and let's get ready. So I like to start with our introductions, and I'm going to have each person to share a little bit about yourself and then tell us what you are currently doing as it relates to COVID-19 in your area. So we have Jeremiah Abia, an incredible singer. If you have not heard him, I am telling you, go to his page and listen to him. Go buy his music. He is incredible. He has also been a voice faculty member and now has his own business, I'm told. So Jeremiah, tell us, please, and thank you for coming. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us what you're currently doing in this COVID-19.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Valerie. I'm very honored to be here tonight. I have spent my career as a recording artist signed to Universal Records and released numerous projects. I've also produced 2 Grammy-nominated projects. But in addition to that, I spent a tremendous amount of time talking about the art of singing, the technique of singing, because I think we're in a time where many people want to be artists, but they don't know what it really means to do all of the stuff behind that. What people are really seeking is fame. And if you want to live as a singer, it requires to have some technical information so you can live a healthy life and have a long career. So I do a lot of master classes around the country. I was on the faculty of Berklee College of Music until May of last year, when I decided to just continue working on my private artist development business, which has become a great tool for the record business. So I consult with Columbia Records, Sony Records, Atlantic Records, RCA Records, and I also work with many of the stage plays on Broadway. So I work between New York and Los Angeles primarily, but I work with artists online from all over the world, actually, from Japan to Moscow to Italy to France. And I think that it has been this Zoom world that everyone's in. I wish I had gotten stock in Zoom because I've been working on Zoom for the last few years, actually. So it's really interesting to see how everyone's caught on to Zoom because of the current quarantine. So that's just a little bit about me. Currently, I'm working with artists and developing artists for record labels. Primarily, that's what I'm doing, as well as master classes. But obviously, much of that stuff is halted because of the quarantine.
Right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for being here. Reverend Dr. Michael Armstrong, my dear brother, friend. Dr. Armstrong is the father of one of my adopted daughters, his daughter, who happens to be my virtual assistant. She's my assistant whenever I am doing a project. She is my assistant. Dr. Armstrong, thank you for joining us tonight. Please share with us.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, and I count it a joy that we share a daughter together. I serve as the pastor of Colesville United Methodist Church. I've been actively engaged in ministry for about 34 years. I presently serve in the United Methodist Church, but was born and bred Baptist. And I also teach as an adjunct professor at Wesley Theological Seminary. And my work now as a local pastor is to prepare my church for reentry. We're in the process of developing our reentering well protocols. It will be a policy and procedure manual so that members will have that well in advance to know how we're going to live into this new reality that we're all living into. It is a pleasure because I also do some consulting with other churches to help them also make ready for reentry.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you this. It is an honor to have a music legend among us. And when you are able to meet one or speak with one, not to mention work with one, it is an honor. Reverend Milton Bigham, I cannot tell you how pleased I am and how honored I am to have you here. For those people, young people that may be on here who are like, who is that? He is the founder of the Georgia Mass Choir. He had much to do with the Mississippi Mass Choir. He had something to do with the Florida Mass Choir. And I read an article the other day that called him the king of gospel choirs. What an honor, what an honor. And then I read that he'd gone on tour with Whitney Houston, the Georgia Mass Choir and Whitney Houston together. And I am honored because the Georgia Mass Choir and the Bennett College Choir, the one that I was directing, went on tour as well. So Reverend Bigham, thank you for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope the hearts and the thumbs up are really going off now so that we can applaud this living legend who is a Grammy Award winner and a Stellar Award winner. Please greet us, please.
Well, I am grateful and thank you, Doctor, for having me here. you know, because I have been in gospel music so many years, and that word legend, sometimes I'm afraid because of it denotes that I'm of age. But I'm grateful to have been around for a long time. As you said, I've done it all with Savoy Records. I've traveled extensively, produced some of the greatest names in gospel music. I go back to Reverend James Cleveland,
Yeah.
Albertina Walker, discovered Kurt Franklin, Donnie McClurkin, and I'm pastoring now in Newark, New Jersey, the Mount Vernon Baptist Church. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, thank you. And what are you currently doing during this?
Pastoring,
Okay,
at a distance.
at a distance. Understood, understood. Thank you, thank you. All right, so I have not personally met Minister Roy Cotton, but I have been on several of his webinars as he has been engaging people in the music industry during this COVID-19 crisis or pandemic. Minister Roy Cotton is the technology person. Not only is he the technology person, but he also has written orchestral arrangements for all kind of artists. He is someone to know. So Roy, welcome, and please share with us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for the invitation. Let me just first say, I've shared part one with my church. I've been telling everybody about it because one of my coworkers, Myron Butler, we have been talking about the need for the science community to have a discussion with the music community. We started seeing about the reality of the aerosol spreading 27 feet. I said, man, this is serious. Somebody has to have this conversation. And within a week of us having that conversation, I found out about Dr. Valerie D. Johnson, and you doing this this great forum is really needed. I mean, everybody needs to watch this, especially while we're talking about reentry. So thank you so much for putting this together. I serve at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, where Dr. Tony Evans is pastor. I was previously the director of music and creative arts, but stepped down from my position to take a role that I really thought was very necessary, music production coordinator. So what I've been doing is just overseeing or kind of being a liaison between the music department and the media production department, and just trying to help with production timelines, because we have a pretty big machine over there. And it's kind of what I was doing anyway as director of music, but I was able to really set up a very great team scenario at my church. And I thought, it was going to be less work, but who knew that COVID-19 was coming? And now I'm doing more work than ever.
Yes,
yes, it's been a lot. But I went to Hampton University, studied music engineering technology. So I learned a lot about kind of where technology was going at Hampton, and was able to study under Dr. Harvey Stokes, who's a great composer, arranger, and even Adolphus Hellstork, who was at Old Dominion University at the time. So I've been an orchestrator. That's kind of my, I guess, forte. But, technology is kind of something I guess I'm really, I would say well-versed in, to be able to help churches to kind of see around the corner and not get caught into, misinformation or just the wrong information for their scenario. So I'm definitely excited to be on here tonight.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Next, we'll go to Bishop Gerald Silver, my dear, dear friend. I tell you, there are few people that can call me at the drop of the hat and ask me to come sing, and he is one of them. He understands musicians. He is appreciative, and he shows that. So I never have a problem going to his church and sharing with him. He is an organist extraordinaire. He has played with and is partnered with David Allen. For those of you that know the great David Allen, as well as the late Bishop Donnie Graves. Welcome, Bishop Silver. Please share with us.
Bless you. Thank you, Professor Johnson. my friend, and thank you for the kind words that you've said. I was trying to think, what would I say that would relate to music? Because I seem like I've been away from it for so long. But I started playing when I was 12 years old, and I'm only 14 now. But now I'm the bishop of the Freedom Assembly Fellowship and the senior pastor of Freedom Temple Church here in Raleigh. And I was the first pastor to Bishop Kenneth Bowles, who was the successor to Thomas Dorsey, and been exposed to music all my life. And so I'm just glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have Dr. Jan Taylor, Prairie View A&M. I'm sure the hearts are going up. She is one fine conductor. She is one fine conductor, but she plays piano and she sings. Dr. Taylor, thank you for joining us. Please share with us.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this panel, and good evening, everybody. I'm Jan Taylor. I am Associate Professor of Music and Director of Choral Activities at Prairie View A&M University in the great state of Texas. My background is, well, my primary job there is directing choirs and running the choral program. I also prepare music educators. So I teach those courses that prepare students to go out to become elementary school music teachers, as well as choral conductors. I'm also a pianist. I still do a lot of accompanying of singers. I also work with Houston Ebony Opera Guild, prepare their chorus for performances. And I am no longer in leadership in church music, but I do sing in my church choir. I currently have been at Prairie View for 25 years. I have taught a total of 30 something. Prior to coming to Prairie View, I taught elementary school music, middle school choir and piano, and high school choir and piano. So my background, I'm really entrenched in music education and choral music. I am currently spending my summer making plans for how I am going to teach my courses at Prairie View. And so I know later we will talk more about what that will look like. But thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we also, I told you we had a group here that's going to help those churches that need help. And the name of the group is Entity. And we have Dr. Tony Arnold McFarland and Alana Krotzler, and they're going to share with us. Please introduce yourselves as well. Tony and I are longtime friends. She is an incredible person, and she is an engineer and a musician. So you can imagine some of the things that she actually produces. So Tony, please share with us. Alana, please share with us.
Sure. Thank you so much, Professor Johnson. And I'm excited to be on the panel. As Professor Johnson just said, I am a musician at heart. I have 20 plus years in music ministry. A few years ago, when I finished my dissertation, I wrote a book called Moving Forward and Facing the Future in the Black Church Worship Experience. My, how do I need to add more to that story right now? And at the same time, I really like being able to take the scientific approach. As Minister Roy mentioned, science has come together with this current situation. And I want to be able to just let God fully use all of my gifts to help out. So I'm excited tonight, and we'll talk more later on. I'll pass it over to my partner, Alana.
Yeah. Thank you. Alana?
Hello, everyone. I think I'm probably the only person on the panel that doesn't have a music background. I have over 20 years of experience in the healthcare and IT industries in various roles of leadership and quality assurance. However, my passion lies within process improvement, problem solving, how can I make things better side of things. So I have a keen eye for recognizing process failures, recognizing defects, and coming up with the best resolution on how to solve those problems. I'm also an entrepreneur, a mother, a domestic violence advocate. As a survivor, I feel it's my calling to assist other men and women in similar situations with the resources and assistance they need to get out of their current situation. And I'm very excited to be here as well to help the faith-based organizations prepare for reopening after our current COVID-19 outbreak.
Awesome, awesome. So again, I told you all earlier, you need to get pen and paper because I think you're going to get some resources tonight that may actually help you move forward. So let's get started. Dr. Johnson Thompson, they want to hear from you again. We have people viewing today that were not on the last time. They may not have seen the post, but please share with us once again, why are we even having this conversation? And welcome. Please share with us something about yourself first.
Okay, good evening again. It's really a pleasure to be among such an outstanding group of faith leaders as well as music leaders. And I want to really give thanks and recognize Professor Johnson for putting this together. This is so important. And when I spoke last week, I was just really happy to be able to do so. I am a molecular virologist by training, and my beginning research, I was at the University of the District of Columbia. I was there for 25 years. I retired as Professor Emeritus of Biology and Environmental Sciences. And I looked at the DNA replication of the virus, simian virus 40, which grew in the same cells that the polio vaccine was used for production. But then I went over to breast cancer research. When you're in research, you go where the money is. And that's where I've been for a long time through my work at the National Institutes of Health. I then worked there for 16 years here in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. And I've been retired for 11 years. This has been a real opportunity to get back into the virology world, and I really appreciate it. So that's about it. Mm-hmm.
All right. So yes, we'll go ahead and move forward with yours.
Okay. And okay.
There you go.
So what I'd like to do tonight is very similar to what I did last year. My first slide is basically an overview of some important issues as they relate to SARS-CoV-2. And I'll go over those issues and I'll finish them with some slides to really actually show you some of what I've been talking about. And I'll start off talking a little bit and not going into the molecular biology at all, but just tell you some general characteristics of the virus that is very pertinent to the faith community in terms of gathering, as well as in singing, as well as in praise dancing. So the virus is SARS-CoV-2, and it causes what we all know as COVID-19. And this virus is transmitted airborne. Some viruses are transmitted via the fecal oral route, like polio. Others may just be passed through cuts in the skin, but this one is really airborne. And whether or not there's any transmission through the fecal oral route is unlikely, though there are still studies going on. It is highly infectious, and it is, as you know, it's ultra microscopic. And that means it can only be visualized with the electron microscope. If you think of it in comparison to bacteria, it is 100 times, at least 100 times smaller than a bacteria. It is spread by respiratory fluids and airborne particles. And this is an area that I'm going to really elaborate once I get to the slides. I will also talk about who are most at risk. And I think all of us know that already, but I'd like to just go over eventually some reasons why those who are at risk are most at risk. So to date, there is no experimentally, scientifically proven cure. There's no cure. And every day you hear about the vaccines that are currently undergoing clinical trials. So we're hopeful that that will soon happen. And I was just looking at TV today, and there were these people out on the beach, and the news reporter asked, "Why are you out here?" And the woman said, "Oh, well, it's just like the flu." So it's not just like the flu. It's much more infectious. It kills probably 10 times more. But the thing about the flu is that there's a vaccine. So the chances of you coming down with the flu is very slim, though we do know that people catch the flu. So it's not like the flu. In order to really combat this virus, we're going to need full implementation of testing, tracing, and quarantining. And as you know, we have not had enough testing yet. I was reading yesterday that only 4% of the population has been tested thus far. So there are several trials underway for both treatment and prevention. And at least one drug has been shown to be of value in shortening the duration of COVID-19, and that's remdesivir. Again, we need to have prevention, and that can only occur via a vaccine. And then I'm going to, as I said earlier, I really want to talk a little bit, I'll talk more about the impact of this virus on the African American community, and then remind you that we're learning more each day about this virus. Meanwhile, there are things that we can do, and we'll talk about that. So last week when I showed this slide, I showed it and I had measles blacked out. And the reason why I showed it is because it talked about how this virus can be transmitted via breathing. And this was on, oh boy, can I go back to that? Let's see. Well, we don't have to go back to it. But the virus, what it shows is that measles virus can be transmitted by breathing, sneezing, and by coughing. And what bothered me when this virus initially came into being, and they were talking about precautions, they focused on the coughing and sneezing, but they never said breathing. And to this day, I'm not certain why, though it is widely accepted now. But that was a slide that was on the CDC site for years to show that this virus could be transmitted via breathing. This slide that we're on now, and I think someone will talk about this later, but I wanted to point it out too, because it's the most recent guidelines for communities of faith. And you can see here that they're talking about, I think it's singing over here, I can't see it, but chanting or reciting. So very important. It's not just about respiratory droplets and coughing and sneezing. Now, this is I'm showing this because Professor Johnson already mentioned that choir practice out in Washington, but I'm showing it to you here because sometimes when you can see information, it stays with you a little longer. But this was the choir rehearsal that was held March 10th before, the virus was declared a pandemic. And there was one person, I see a lot of information. Some say the person was asymptomatic, but it turns out in the original scientific report, the person wasn't asymptomatic. The person was sniffling. But you can see what happened out of the entire population of singers. That one index case led to 32 confirmed and 20 probable cases. And I think there were about 6 or 7 unaffected. But as Professor Johnson said, 2 of these individuals died. Now, what this slide does not show is that how many people these individuals passed it on to, okay? So that's what we also have to really think about. If in fact, as the math goes, that for every one person infects 3 people. So you can imagine if these people weren't quarantined, what could have happened? And we know they weren't quarantined in the beginning. And let me say, this study occurred, I think this study occurred much later. They just went back and tracked these people. So this slide also shows, now that was the epidemiology of COVID-19 in a choir. This shows the epidemiology of COVID-19 in a long-term care facility in King County, Washington. And of course, this study went from February 27th through March 16th. It's an epidemiology study. And what you do is you go back and you pick up the data. So once again, this really shows you how this virus can be passed. February 27th, 1 resident was infected and 1 healthcare person was infected. And it just goes to show you how, as the days passed, by March 6th, you had an increase in healthcare individuals who had it. And it turns out that during this period of time, they hadn't infected more residents, but then they did. And then if you go through this, you can see that the people who were most impacted were the residents of this healthcare facility. Now, once again, we don't know how many people these people infected, because for the healthcare people, they went home. But what we do know is that overall in this country, the numbers just kept increasing. Now, this slide is to really show you how the aerosol is generated from person A to person B. And then I should also say that whether or not you actually get this infection depends upon time and distance, okay? So it's duration, the duration time, how long you're exposed, and then how close you are. So this can show you that at this point time 0, because the distance is so far away from this individual isn't impacted. But then as the time increases, the aerosol is dispersing and many larger particles are settling. Now, let me just explain this settling. So if you're really talking about viral particles that are surrounded by mucus, then those particles tend to be larger, so they will fall. But then for the viruses that are able to be released from the sputum, they can become airborne and move further out into the room. And then, of course, eventually, because of time and duration, this last individual, C, is exposed to the virus. And this is an old slide, actually. It showed the transmission of Ebola. You will recall that, you will recall the Ebola epidemic. It was a pandemic in, well, it was more widespread in Africa, I should say. Pandemic really means worldwide. Epidemic is when it's in a particular location. But Ebola did not become worldwide. Now, the thing about Ebola here, the virus, this virus is about 10 times larger than the coronavirus. And so you can see that some of these droplets do fall, but then others can be dispersed throughout the room. And so you can see 6 feet here. This is what we're talking about, 6 feet. And you can see that this Ebola virus even went further. Now, let me remind you that Ebola is not an airborne, it's not airborne like COVID-19. People get Ebola through blood, coming in contact with the blood of infectious people. That's the way it's transmitted primarily. And then I think this slide is very important because it's a population adjusted COVID cases by age. And you can see here that the majority of the cases are in the age 55 and above, or you can go from 65 on. So I think this is very important as it relates to the average age of individuals who routinely attend church. I know for my church, this is the age group, people you can really depend on routinely and constantly attending church. And then another slide talks about the age in terms of rates of hospitalization, who's hospitalized more. You can see that data. And then we get into the devastating impact of COVID-19 on African Americans. And you are already, everybody has already heard about the disparity among African Americans in terms of COVID-19. And here the information is even more specific. You heard about Louisiana, and a lot of that can be traced back to Mardi Gras. And if you've been at Mardi Gras, and I've been to a couple, I haven't been excited about them because people are just too close, even before I knew about COVID-19, and they're all over you. So Mardi Gras occurred just before the shelter in started. And so while Black people made up 32% of Louisiana, they shared 70% of the cases. Once again, this does not tell you about the people who left Mardi Gras and went back to their respective homes and the role that they played in transmitting the virus. And you can see Illinois, Michigan, and my state, North Carolina, as well as Chicago. Now, these are data as of April 6th. Okay, so that's more than a month away. But I can tell you in terms of North Carolina, where I have more recent data, And this is what's going on in North Carolina per May 18, 2020. You can see it's almost twice the amount of deaths as compared to whites, as compared to Asians, which is very low, and Hispanics, which is really interesting because some of the characteristics that we know causes increased incidences of mortality has a lot to do with crowding. And we definitely know that crowding does occur in this population as well. However, the interesting thing about Hispanics is that they have the longest lifespan and the best health outcomes until they come to this country. One of the things I didn't say in introducing myself is that when I was at the NIH, part of my portfolio was addressing health disparities. And so I thought I had another slide, but I don't. So what I will just briefly mention is what are the issues that relate to African Americans having this high incidence of mortality. And in looking at that, it can help us kind of understand how this might relate to our faith community. First of all, as you know, we've heard it all along, that we have all of those underlying health conditions, what we refer to as health disparities, the lack of access to care, as well as a lack of insurance. And I add one more, and that is what I like to say is the Nile, you know, the Nile in Africa, it equates to denial. Often when we have certain health issues, we deny that they are there, and we tend not to seek health care even when we can, because we are suspicious of the medical community. We also, especially those in the lower socioeconomic group, live in closed conditions. The fact that African Americans are, and I don't have the statistics on this, but I just think that many African Americans are churchgoers. And when we go to church, we hug, we kiss, we sing, we shout. And for many, unless you can do that, they feel that that's not about church. And in some religions, for example, the Roman Catholic religion, communion is a part of every service. And, you know, as they have told me, if I can't get communion, then I haven't really been to church. And you can imagine, at least in the Catholic Church, where the priest places the host on your tongue, and then he goes to the next person and places the host on the tongue, you can imagine. However, in most churches today, the host is placed in the hand. But even that has some opportunity for transmission. The other reason why the health disparities, we see such a high rate, is because in employment, we are the first line workers. We are the food service, we are the cleanup people, and go on and on. We're the transportation people, and so forth and so on. And then there's the economic issue. There's the economic issue wherein some of our people have to go to work. And often they will take a chance, especially when the employer is saying, oh, you come back and, you know, everything is gonna be okay. And then some cultural practices we have, okay? Getting back to the Nile. You know, my brother Malcolm X said, if you want to keep something from Black folks, put it in a book. So often we won't read, but we will pass word of information around, and sometimes it's inaccurate. And I don't know if you've ever been in a group wherein you are getting to know each other and somebody says, if you have 25 people, you start a message on one end and you pass it to the last person and you see what the message is. It's not like what it initially was. So these are some of the unique issues I think that relate to, and plus I should say the stress, just the stress can really play a factor. But this issue of where you are most likely to pick up the virus is in crowded areas. That's why you see these cases in the military, crowding, church services, we know about those. These are the areas that have been studied. Healthcare facilities. We know that in the first wave of this virus, healthcare workers were terribly impacted. And why was that? Because they did not know what they were dealing with and they weren't using protective equipment. And then once they did find out, it was hard to get it. I am very proud, and actually I'm an HBCU graduate as well. I'm really proud of the fact that the university people in academia, because that would be an ideal setting for the virus to transmit, right? But the schools closed down very early when all of this happened. So I am a firm believer that this virus initially took hold because no one knew about it. And just in going to the movies, going to entertainment events, going to healthcare services, standing in lines, all of that aided the virus to move very rapidly. And that's why we have to continue to take the precautions that we know about in everything that we do to inhibit the movement of this virus. And so I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a lot to digest. We're going to dive in. Who wants to start first? I mean, I'm thinking there's a lot of thoughts that I'm having right now that I've not had before. Bishop Silver, would you like to share with us what are you thinking now? You have a church, you have things that have to be done to prepare for your church. Talk to us.
Yeah, I think we're not going back after tonight. No, there's some serious thinking that we have to do. I saw some of the questions about a task force that people have at their churches. I think there is a lot of thinking that we have to do concerning reopening. Matter of fact, I have said that I've tried to be in compliance with the governor's requirements. And I have said, even after the governor gives us the okay to return, I'm going to wait at least about a month before I bring the people in because of my obligations as a shepherd or as an under shepherd with the church. I think I have a real responsibility, as much as lie within my power, to protect them. And after hearing Dr. Thompson tonight, then I think I'm on the right track. And that's why I have no determined time when we are going back yet. And because we have not decided what we're going to do in that area. And
yeah.
I just think it's so crucial, and especially with our tradition. With my tradition, I heard all the things Dr. Thompson said. We love to sing, we love to shout, and in my tradition, the way we worship is completely against all of the requirements that have been named. And we go on Sunday mornings. We do a live streaming on Facebook. Live, but we only use the praise team. We don't use the choir. We space them out at least 6 feet from each other. And I just told my daughter this afternoon, I said, we couldn't bring back the choir where we have rows, because if someone is standing right behind another person, standing in front of another person, and then the person behind them is singing, and because we do a lot of congregational singing too, then it would definitely expose us.
Right.
So I don't know that it is any way possible, and I probably have not thought about everything, but I don't think it is any way possible for us to feel free after having a better understanding about this in going back to the norms. I don't see that. I know we have to worship, and I know we have to find a way to worship. And to find another way to do this, but there is no such thing as normal now, as long as this exists like this.
Yes, yes. Reverend Bingham, would you share with us as well?
I am in agreement. I am pastor, and I think that I guess everybody has heard this cliche, and I gotta say it because it is true. From a spiritual perspective, the church has never closed because we are a spiritual entity. The building has been closed. That does not prevent us from being the church. I'm in agreement that I don't think we're going to go back to normal. And pardon me for saying this, normal wasn't working, and in a lot of respects. And I think we got to look forward. God is going to give us the know-how. God is the author of technology. It all comes here, and I know we got to be practical. I can appreciate Dr. Thompson. I'm blown away by your presentation. No, however, but we are the hardest hit, and it just doesn't make sense. You know, and pardon me again, I don't know. Yeah, we gotta look ahead, but I don't know what's all the discussion about. And I hope you all understand what I mean when I say that. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. There's really nothing to discuss in terms of our people. If we as shepherds care about our sheep, why put them in harm's way? We got to figure, and I don't know whether we have to figure it out, but we'll wait for knowledge. But in the meantime, I think that when we go back, I believe that everybody should be going back. And that means a lot of stuff has to happen for us to get back in the building. I think more importantly, we ought to be talking about how do we transcend the building and figure out new ways of having church, new ways of getting the word. I have come to the conclusion the pandemic has made it possible to get more word out than any of us ever thought we would. I don't have a large church, but I say for my church, because the world now is, you can speak to the world. And I think the effect is greater. So we're not ready to go back in no way. How do you choose who comes back? You can't fill the church. 25%, who are the 25%? How do you make that decision? Probably you got to let people come this week, some other come that week, but that's scary because people have to stay with the same group for you to be able to trace it. So I think we got a long way to go. I'm sorry, I'm taking up a lot.
No, that's fine. Someone just commented that, yes, this is the time that we should be redefining what church is. And I think you just spoke to exactly that. Reverend Armstrong, share with us. I know you already have a task force in place. Please share with us because people need to hear that and need to know what is it? What should we be doing when we do get ready to go back?
We've been working because, again, we're not rushing back, and we're actually still under stay-at-home orders in Silver Spring, Maryland, where we're located. But we are also preparing because we know at some point we will have to go back and one needs to be prepared. We've developed our task force, and there's a medical person who happens to have worked on viruses on the task force because we need that kind of expertise on board. That task force is tasked with determining all of our areas of re-entry, how you enter the building, how you exit the building, how we would do communion, how we would do baptisms, how we would do all of the things that we do. And of course, singing, we have already determined by our task force that that's a long ways off for us, as much as we love music. We are going to continue to do what we've done. We're going to continue because we will start to have people phased back in. But here's our decision tree. The task force has to determine what fits us as a community of faith. With so many people who are having those conditions that would make it impossible, is it even worth attempting? And at what time? Secondarily, we're also looking at, in our estimation, we're going to have to phase it back. And by phase it back, we're going to go back slowly in phase 3 for us with just the team to actually live stream, a very small team. The second phase for us will be to invite some of the volunteers who will help us when we're starting to return. We're going to actually practice things for several weeks to make sure that all of the things that we've considered are working and will work well. And then we will invite a portion back, and that will be by, unfortunately, the reality for us is that we anticipate that maybe only 25% will be able to come back at any given worship experience. And that will be by an app that one of our financial companies has created where people can register to come to church. We'll have that list, check people off. We've also begun to order supplies, knowing that we're going to need supplies like masks, some new stations for hand sanitizing and the like. If those things are not there, we're not ready. We're also going to train our people in new ways of hospitality because the reality is being hospitable is important, but how we do that is going to have to be different. For instance, we're going to have to be so careful not to turn people off, but if they're not willing to wear masks, we're going to have to invite them not to be in worship with us. That's new, that's different, and that's hard. But we've got to have ways to be able to determine, to keep all safe and remind them that's what we're doing. And so we're going to phase from just a team to do streaming from the church because we've done all of that remotely. We will then have the volunteers come in at subsequent weeks to begin to test all that we've put into our written document, and it will be a written document the members will have of what is required. Luckily for us, being in a denomination where we have resources from the denomination, they gave us several, well, let me change that, 9 different tip sheets for us to consider all of the possibilities of the things that we do as church, and to make sure that we've considered all of those things as we make our plans. So we've been actively engaged in putting the plan together, garnering the resources. And additionally for us, we've had to even consider upgrading our technology in the church. And that is coming at a price and a cost, and trying to figure out how we're going to do that. But we've not had screens in this church. We're going to have screens because we've removed all of the hymn books. because paper in the sanctuary is going to be very dangerous for us. We have pew cushions that are going to have to be removed initially because those things can continue to hold germs much longer. And we're going to, have to wipe the pews down, sanitize them after each service, and also even go to some electronic or electrostatic cleaning to try to reach hard to reach. So we're considering all of those as a part of the plan. I'm taking a little time to say that you got to look at each one of those and know what you're going to do, because this virus is dangerous.
And one of the questions that was posed last week was, what are we going to do about hymn books and classrooms and rehearsal spaces? And it is very important that you have a strategic plan. You got to have a strategic plan if you're going to move forward with this in a wise way. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope people are gleaning from that if you don't have a strategic plan, you should start working on one. Minister Roy Cotton, I know you're down there in the heat in Texas. How are you all handling this? What are your thoughts tonight?
Well, I can relate a lot with the church in Washington State. When I was looking at, the graphs and the charts that Dr. Thompson had, we actually had a lady who came to our choir rehearsal on March 11th, right before, the shelter in place started, at least in Texas. And I actually had some questions for Dr. Thompson, because this lady didn't know that she was asymptomatic. And she was an alto. She actually spread it. Some people in the choir got infected by COVID-19. One of the ladies was another alto. Actually, three altos got it from this one lady, and one of the altos, it went to her husband, and her husband actually passed. So I didn't know whether, and this particular lady doesn't sit in the back; she sits in the front. So I was wondering, is the aerosol, is it omnidirectional? Like, can it go behind you if there are people behind you? Is that possible for that to happen?
Yes. Yeah, because if you think about it, it goes out, it goes up. And depending upon the amount of space, it just really circulates throughout the room.
Yeah, see, this is very dangerous. I'm glad you again that you all are having this conversation. So what we're doing, we're looking at definitely the praise team. We've been taping. What we do is we've been taping on Wednesday, and then we'll actually store up we'll do 3 or 4 worship sets at a time, and just so we're only coming once a month, sometimes twice a month if there's a special event. And the musicians, we're all masked up. The singers are spread out. We only do 3 singers, and they're very spread out stage farther than 6 feet. And what the choir's been doing is of course the virtual choir. So everybody, records at home on their phones. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing. We know the choir's not going to be singing anytime soon, not together at least. They will in cyberspace, but in physical space, you don't have to stay here, but you got to go home this time.
Right. And some researchers are saying that you really should be 15 to 20 feet. Now, that's
right.
Probably really impossible, but 6 feet certainly is not enough.
Right.
You really, again, it's about strategic planning and trying to figure out what are we going to do with the space that we have. And Dr. Tony McFarland is going to talk about that shortly. She and Alana are going to talk about some of those things. So, Professor Abia, tell us what you're thinking hearing all of this, given, you are dealing with a lot of different people and you have your own singing career.
Yes, it has definitely impacted, all of the artists that I know, including myself, in a major way, because we make our living being in front of people and, sharing our gifts. For instance, I work with so many people on Broadway, and Broadway has been shut down to now September. But the word on the street is really that it won't open until probably January. And that is, really devastating, because these artists all of us artists are making significant amount of money to obviously live as artists and not to have an income at all. However, though it may be scary, I have always looked on the brighter side. I try to look at what the optimistic part of this is. And the part for me is almost exciting because most of us are trying to, work so much. We're trying to, we're only working, but we're also neglecting so many things that have been put in our hearts and our minds. This is an opportunity to, the crisis conceives creativity. And so we as artists have to learn how to tap into what makes us an artist, because it's not just a composer or whoever putting something in our lap, but it's the opportunity for us to create our own work, which I think a lot of us neglect a lot of times because we're on the job. For instance, people on Broadway are working, they're doing 8 shows a week. So that means they don't have a lot of time. They have 1 day off per week, and they're scrambling on that 1 day a week to try to do whatever they can in their personal lives. So now there's a lot of downtime for them, a lot of downtime for a lot of us. So I think this is the opportunity to work on the things that we've been neglecting, or find new opportunities, new ways to express the art, because when things open up, now you're prepared, right? So it's like being prepared in season and out of season. Out of season, you prepare so that when the season comes back, we obviously have things that we can contribute to the world, and do those things. However, in the current time, it is scary because, a lot of us don't know when we'll get back to, I had a whole touring schedule, between master classes and performances, et cetera, et cetera. I can't, none of those things are happening. The whole concert have been closed. Venues in New York are closing down. I know how it is in other cities, but even rehearsal spaces that have been around for 30, 40 years have closed. So people are really panicking. But I feel hopeful, and I know that, this seems crazy, but guess what? There's unemployment right now. Take advantage of that. I always tell artists, take advantage of unemployment, and, force yourself to be creative, because if you're not, because right now we're forced into a new normal, because we'll never go back to life how it used to be.
Right.
If you don't find a way to push yourself into that new territory, you're going to be left behind.
Yes.
So I'm telling everyone every day, think outside the box, build your own thing, and they will come to you after this is done. So those are the things, I'm grateful, that I'm not at the conservatory, the school anymore, right? Because I'm around so many people all the time, and I don't have to worry about that now. It's but it's on my own terms. And I think that's the whole point of it. It's like we have to find a way to bring things on our own terms. And this is a great opportunity. I really, although it's scary, although it has changed a lot, we've all lost a tremendous amount of income across the board. I think it's a great opportunity to be innovative and find your new thing.
Excellent. And I think a very good point, and I've actually shared this with my students. While you're sitting at home and you say that music is your passion, that is your calling, then you should be working on it right now.
That's
so
it.
You emerge, I should hear something different. If you are a singer or you can't get gigs, then I've seen people go out on their balconies and sing to the community. I mean, There are a number of ways for you to be doing your craft. If you are a songwriter, you should be really writing right about
lots to write about. But there's also, what about the business side of things? There's lots of things that artists can be working on, because there's the business side, there's programming, there's, practice. There are a million things that someone can be doing in this time, besides fretting that they can't go outside, or, they don't have a gig. Well, now this is the time to shed. It's the time to practice. It's the time to get yourself ready, because this won't last forever.
Thank you. So we're going to hear from Dr. Taylor, and then we're going to hear from our entity strategy group.
Thank you. A special thank you to Dr. Johnson Thompson, too, for sharing the information that you did, because it is, for me, it is the science that is going to guide what I do going forward in terms of teaching classes. A lot of us, or people within the listening audience here, probably are well aware of that well-known presentation by NATS, National Association of Teaching of Singing, the ACDA, Chorus America, that well-known webinar, or infamous webinar, depending on how you think about it. where some science and medical experts shared research very similar, or the same research, I guess, that you shared, Dr. Thompson. However, you made it much more clear and you stated it so much more succinctly. But in any case, the information that was shared here and in other research that I have read, for me, pretty much says that choir, as it used to be done, face-to-face rehearsals and performances are just not going to happen for me in my classroom at Prairie View. We already knew anecdotally that viruses, and sickness spreads within a choir like wildfire. All it takes is one person to come into a room with something and then it just spreads throughout the choir. We've all seen that before. And so I am relying heavily on the sciences to what is the scientific research to determine, help guide me in what I do in my classroom. And so what that will be is this summer I'm working on ways and designing ways to teach my ensembles as online courses, perhaps as a hybrid. I mean, if in fact it turns out in the future that we may be able to meet in small groups, provided we take the right precautions such as, of course, the social distancing, use of PPE, disinfecting the rooms, proper ventilation in the rooms, those kinds of things that will be the responsibility of the university, of course. But in any case, my classes might look like virtual rehearsals, via Zoom meetings or other types of recording platforms. I am relying on a lot of research. I'm reading things. There are two things in particular that stand out that have really helped guide me in my thinking toward how I'm going to teach conduct choral rehearsals online. One is there's an ebook that has been downloaded to the website of an organization called Chorus Connection. And this ebook is called A Guide to 2020-2021 Season Planning. And it has been helpful to me in that it really puts a lot of information on that directs the way it directs me to think about what my purpose will be for the choir. What is going to be the guiding purpose of what I do with choir in this age, since we cannot have live performances. And so it kind of helps me guide my thinking in that way. And then the second resource that I've looked at is an article called A Virtual Choir Rehearsal. And I think I got this article actually from a friend, our mutual friend, composer Damon Dandridge, who shared this with me. And this is a valuable article in that it lays out various scenarios for working with choirs virtually. Some of the ideas that I have are to train section leaders how to hold section rehearsals via Zoom. Now, mind you, Zoom is not a platform by which you can sing together, but you can hold forums and meetings and do demonstrations as such. There are other types of, there are other platforms that I'm looking at. There's one in particular that my university is going to, I think, well, I'm going to approach our university about getting it. It's called ScreenFlow. And it is a type of video platform where I can record lessons, both audio and video. And then there are free platforms and apps that can be used like Google Classroom, I think it's called Flipgrid. But in any case, so my point is that I'm looking at all types, making myself familiar with the various types of virtual platforms that are out there to help me plan lessons. Now, I won't be able to, I'll have to change my mindset, or those of us who work in academia, and we'll have to change our mindsets. We'll have to change the mindsets of our students about how choir will have to look during this time. I mean, we can't teach, we can teach certain things about vocal technique. We cannot focus on blend and balance, but we can design lessons that about vocal technique. We can focus on things more like the study of, historical background of composers, historical context of the pieces that we learn. We have to change our mindset about even the kinds of repertoire that we would do. Whereas I had originally planned to do a major work, Beethoven Mass in C, that's not going to happen. That's pretty extended work to try to do virtually. But instead, I'm looking for repertoire that speaks, where maybe the text speaks to the time. Pieces that are shorter, pieces that where the text may be more meaningful to students at these times. So, so basically, I think that as choral directors, those of us who work in church, whether we work in church or in academia, we just have to learn. We need to adapt very quickly. I think we need to look at, or at least surround ourselves or network with people who are familiar with virtual platforms. And we need to figure out ways, we need to make sure that our students are equipped with the tools that they need in order to hold classes virtually. Our university has decided for the fall that we will have online classes, some face-to-face classes, or a hybrid thereof. So rather than wait for them to tell me what to do, I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to just decide how things should look, because I think as the choral director, I think I would have a better idea of what that might look like for our class. So said all that to say, be flexible, read, research, ask for help. These kinds of forums where people come together and talk about things, align yourselves with people who are in the same boat. I think that it would be great if other HBCU choir directors can get together on a forum and talk about how we can make this look for this upcoming year.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I want to share something. Someone was asking in the last conversation about, is there any plan for the choir right now? So I have a friend, Norris Garner, who's in Virginia, who had me come and do a vocal technique workshop with him. So the choirs don't have to just not do anything on their scheduled night, but they can, like you said, do all kinds of learning to read music, having the vocal technique workshops. And I think on my Life with Val D. Page, there is a young lady that's going to be doing something, I think this week or next week. So be sure you check that out. So there are a number of things that people can do. In a minute, we're going to have Roy tell us about that technology piece. But let's hear from Entity Strategy Group. Tell us, we've heard already that Reverend Armstrong has some strategies in place, but let's hear what you are planning to do.
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen real quick here and just kind of like let you guys kind of see what we offer. I hope you guys are seeing it. So I won't go through everything again, but just want to kind of mention that I do have a lot of love for the faith-based community. I've been a part of a music ministry, music and worship arts. I'm also a STEM advocate. So this gives me an opportunity to bring my music ministry, my experience from corporate America, and my engineering background all in one. I will mention, I started getting into this arena of consulting and providing insight on music ministry mostly when I wrote my book, Moving Forward and Facing the Future in the Black Church Worship Experience. And I followed that up with a second book called The Evolution of African-American Worship. And these are both based on my dissertation, which is on the evolution of African-American worship. And in these books, I'm using similar tools that I'm going to discuss here, as well as I included scriptures and just a lot of information that teaches the choir how our ministry has involved in the Black church and the things that we can do to improve it. And lining up with what's happening right now, this conversation, this panel, is giving me a further opportunity to take what I started in the books to the next level. I don't have it written out, but working with my partner, Alana here, we're going to be able to further prepare us as our worship evolves. This is just another evolution of how we're going to have to worship in our churches. Everything that's already been mentioned, the way we worship, you know, our norms, our cultural norms in our churches is different. We are communal people, we are oral people, we hug, we spread love. All of those things, we have to evolve them for what we have today. And I'm going to let Alana just say just a few things about her background as well.
Right. So my background, I've been a business strategist, a corporate solutions architect, a corporate data analyst. I'm very used to looking at the data, figuring out trends, what direction we need to go in as a company. So taking all of those skills and applying it to our quote unquote new normal today, I think that Tony and I can provide a lot of faith-based organizations assistance with reopening, things you need to consider. What are your risks? What is the likelihood of that risk, and how are you going to mitigate the risk for the different things that you do within your organization? And then this just gives you a little bit of my mind, body, and spirit side. I'm a stress management coach as well, emotional intelligence coach, women's wellness advocate, and I already mentioned I work with a lot of domestic violence abuse survivors. So Entity Strategy Group. Tony and I are very passionate about helping others. And when our country was hit with COVID-19 and shut down, we began to think of ways we could assist businesses with safely reopening, utilizing the tools and skill sets we've become experts in throughout our careers. So for faith-based organizations, we thought of 3 ways of helping, one being virtual coaching, training, and consulting, depending on what the needs are of the organization and your organizational budgets. We can help you put together your emergency operations readiness plan. How do you put in preventative measures to prevent an outbreak? What if you have a COVID-19 outbreak? What do you do? Instead of going into panic mode, you'll already have a plan together that gives you step-by-step what you need to do in order to quarantine and communicate out that you have an outbreak. Outbreak prevention and containment. What are those corrective actions? Collaboration with other cross-functional colleagues. We have a vast network of colleagues that we could go to. If we find that our skill set doesn't meet your needs, we can reach out into our network and bring someone else in to collaborate with us as well.
I want to just add here too, that we're looking at this holistically. I know this panel is talking about choirs and singers and what that feature is, but in order to have that conversation, you have to go back to the church as a whole. Every church should already have an emergency operations, readiness plan. What would you do if there was a tornado? What would you do if there was an active shooter at your church? So this is another extension of what should already be in place. So if you don't have that in place, you may need to start there. All right, so what are we doing that is different? Why would you want to work with us? One thing that we offer that's valuable is, as someone mentioned earlier, we've already seen science, a background in science and engineering, where we will be able to take years of problem solving and being trained at this and being trained at finding non-conformances and compliances, taking that and applying it to this new scenario. Helping you revise, redesign, recreate your processes. And then one thing that is very important, you'll learn as an engineer, is testing thoroughly, step by step. I heard Pastor Armstrong say they're going to do a dry run and they're going to test it out. That's great. And then you also need a baseline. As churches start to restart, everybody needs to get tested before they come back in the building. So make sure that's in your plan. You need a baseline of where people are before they even start. So you can do that, have that testing done periodically. And then once you have your process in place, you'll need to be able to audit it. Someone needs to come in and see if they can break your process. That's called stress testing it. And we'll use some tools. FMEA is one tool that we'll use. And everyone's risk level and the likelihood of the risk and the severity of the risk may not be the same. I know we've been hearing 6 feet, but that's a minimum. If someone is a diabetic, maybe their level of distance needs to be greater. Or if you have a population that has a demographic that has a lot of people who have already compromised immune systems, maybe they need to sit together. So these are just some of the things that you need to think about that we would help you think through. And I'll let Alana do this one.
So COVID-19 preparedness. Now's the time to evaluate your organizational processes. Prior to reopening your business, you should consider 2 major areas for COVID-19 preparedness: preventative measures and a COVID-19 outbreak, both of which are going to require assessments and plans of action. We can help you with putting into your plan best practices to reduce exposure and your risk of acquiring COVID-19 at your establishment. So things to consider: infection preventative measures, respiratory etiquette. Even if you require your congregation to wear a mask, all masks do not prevent respiratory droplets from coming through the mask and landing onto other people, your pews, your hymnals, etc. So you need to take that into consideration. Social distancing measures, and I think we talked about this earlier tonight. Consider nodding, bowing, and waving instead of shaking hands, hugging, and kissing each other. You might want to consider no longer holding hands during your church services and prayers. Depending on the makeup of your congregation, you may also want to consider for your seniors having a separate service for them, or having them sit in a particular area within the church every service. Cleaning, disinfecting, and decontamination. Ventilation measures. When was the last time you had your ventilation system inspected or cleaned? You're gonna have to do more cleaning now than you've ever done before. What cleaning supplies are you gonna use? How will you clean? How often will you clean? You're gonna have to clean your pews after every service. You're gonna have to clean your hymnals. All these things you need to take into consideration and put into your preventative measure plan. Communications of guidelines to your staff and congregation. Consider putting up signs throughout the congregation that lists out your respiratory etiquette measures, telling people to continue to wash their hands. All these things the CDC is putting out there, you should consider getting signs for and putting them up within your church building. What if you have a COVID? Go ahead.
I was just going to add real quick, when you talked about ventilation system, I know people are getting ready to start going back, but one thing that's important to note is that if a building has been sitting for an extended period of time, your water and your HVAC system will have to be tested for Legionella. So re-entry means that there's a list of things that you need to do to the facility, so that just coming back and the things that would normally function for you with your water and HVAC, those will have to be tested before you bring people back into the building. I wanted to mention that. Go ahead, Alana.
Yeah. So if you have a COVID-19 outbreak within your congregation, how would you handle that? Do you have an emergency operation plan already in place? If you don't have a plan, you really need to consider developing one, because that plan, like Tony alluded to earlier, is going to tell you how to react when you have an active shooter, a natural disaster such as a tornado, and an infectious disease outbreak such as COVID-19. This is your plan on how do we react if this happens within our church organization. If someone comes in and they're sick, how will you isolate them? Where will you take them so that they're not within the congregation actively infecting others? social distancing measures, similar to how the grocery stores are doing today? Are you going to have arrows on the floor? How are you going to direct traffic in and out of the church? All of these things are things you need to consider and put into your plan for a COVID-19 outbreak. Next slide, Tony.
All right. So I know we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure people get a chance to test their own eye for COVID spread. So if you look at this number one, this first picture here, if you could put in the chat on Facebook, what do you see here that is a risk? What are the items that you see in picture number one that would be a risk for COVID-19 spread? So put that in the Facebook post if you're able to see that. You have, looks like a praise team, people singing, holding mics, wearing robes, okay? We've all seen that scene. The next one, this is a picture from Aretha Franklin's funeral, okay? You have Stevie Wonder there singing. Looks like there's Dottie Peoples up there. He's playing a keyboard. You have people on the mics. You got a few people in the back congregating. What risk do you see in number two? Put that in your post. All right, and let's move on to number three. We all know who that is. President Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama and their family, they're in the congregation singing, holding pews, holding books. They're in the pews, singing with other congregants. What risk do you see there? All right. So let's go to the next slide and see how well we did. So this is a list of corrective actions against COVID-19 spread. So based on these pictures, what we did here is compiled a list of things that you would need to do to correct all of these scenarios. I know we've seen them all. If you're a singer or a musician, you've been a part of them all. Social distancing for singers, musicians, and the congregation. That one is easy. Cleaning the microphones. You pass that mic around a lot. There's covers that you could get on your mic. Personally, maybe we have to have our own mics. Maybe that's what we have to start doing. Adding PPE, you got to make sure you get masks, safety glasses in some incidences. Handling robes, just taking your robe off and how you handle it. We all know that we can sweat in that robe, we get to singing, we get worked up. And when you leave your perspiration on your clothing, that has the virus, that could have the virus in it. That's an opportunity for the droplets to be passed on to someone else. And I have not played a keyboard since the pandemic has occurred, except for my own. You would need Lysol, which I already had Lysol wipes when I was playing at a church. I already had Lysol wipes, but you would definitely need to make sure that you put on some gloves and clean the keyboard, the organ, the drumsticks, the chair that the drummer sits in. If you're sharing instruments, you definitely have to make sure those get cleaned thoroughly. I heard someone mention sanitizing the hymnals already. Our fans, any shared material, it's probably best just to eliminate that and use electronic devices for that. And then sanitizing the pews, the choir stand, all seats in between your services. So what does the new normal look like? Here's some photos that I found of some churches that are already operating. What we would do is help you come up with a systemic method for these visuals that you see here. Pre-screening, temperatures, checking to see if anyone has a fever. Pre-screening is not 100%, but it does help you detect fever of someone who could possibly be able to contaminate the rest of the congregation. As I mentioned earlier, you need to get everyone tested who's going to come back in the church. And then you also would need to establish a way to trace those people in case an outbreak occurs. You may want to get population health data if parishioners will allow you to have it. I know there's some laws around it, but maybe just kind of knowing people's immunity concerns. And have what's called control gates. That's something that we use in the manufacturing world, the assembly world. There are places where you would just check to make sure the process is happening correctly before you let people move on. It's kind of like what we do with TSA. You go to the airport. Containment and just capacity adjustment. You're not going to have the space that you actually built your building for, or whatever your sanctuary is designed for, your choir stand is designed for, you won't have that capacity anymore. So you have to recalculate what that looks like. So next steps. If you decide that you want to reach out to us, the first thing we do is complete an assessment of your current status and where you are. Maybe you have a plan already, an emergency plan, or maybe you don't. So that's the first thing. And then we set our costs and considerations based on the factors shown there, your budget, the size of your church, and the scope of work that you need from us. And then we will compile a proposal, send that to you, and then align on what works and what doesn't work. So our contact information is here. If you would like to learn more, reach out to Alana, myself, or even to Professor Johnson to find out more on how we can help you. That's it.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So people were responding to your questions. They were saying that they were standing too close, the microphone, so they were responding. So I think people really, really get it. So we're getting ready to wrap up, but we must have Minister Roy Cooper tell us about technology. Everybody thinks, some people think it's easy. It is not. So he's going to tell us about that and then give his information as to how you can reach out to him, because he can actually do it for you. And then we have just 2 or 3 questions specifically for the pastors, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. So let's just first talk about rehearsals. We've been hearing a lot about rehearsals on Zoom, and I think it's pretty much common knowledge now that we all should know that you cannot sing together on Zoom and everybody sync up properly. Few things to say about this. One, that technology does not exist yet, obviously. If there was an app for that, we would know about it. I mean, they would be billionaires, whoever they are, if that app was available. But good news, there's been a lot of conspiracy theory about 5G, and people have even been saying like 5G is the reason why COVID-19 came. It's a lot of YouTube conspiracy theories out there, but kind of in the technology world, 5G is going to be the first platform or the first network from satellites that's going to give us the capability to do what we wish Zoom could do. Once 5G is, consumer grade where everybody has it, you'll be able to be on Zoom in Bangladesh, I'll be on Zoom in Dallas, and we'll be able to sing together in perfect harmony and perfect timing. Because right now, the only way to do it is with fiber optics, and that's if everybody's on the same fiber optic network, and it runs a lot of data. It costs, it's very expensive to do that. So that's good news. Once 5G comes, we'll be able to, have rehearsals. The best practices right now for rehearsals is actually to pre-record all of the parts prior to rehearsal. And basically what the choir director does, they get on their keyboard and they can pluck out the parts like they would do in rehearsal. And they say, okay, all right, altos, y'all sing. Now, when he does that, he needs to make sure that everybody has their computers muted, because he don't want to hear them, because they're not going to be together, right? There's no synchronization. So everybody's going to sing, but they're really just going to be, it's thought of that you're learning what he just played. Or even better, the choir director could use iRig. And I know a lot of people have talked about iRig. They have a couple of different versions of iRig. Of course, they had the first iRig, then they had iRig 2. Now they have iRig Pro Duo, which allows you to record and listen at the same time from the internet. And then the newest version is the iRig Stream. Now, the problem with iRig Stream is perfect for Zoom. It's actually made for Zoom. It's made for Facebook Live and Instagram Live. The issue is I ordered iRig Stream 2 months ago and it's still on back order. Nobody can get their hands on it. That's why Teddy Riley and all those people who've been doing the versus battles have been having a hard time using the iRig Stream, because we're all ordering them and they're just not available, because a lot of them are manufactured in China. And China got beef with us right now. So, hey, we are where we are. So iReadStream is going to be probably the best solution for you to do your rehearsals on Zoom. You just have to wait till it's ready. There is another alternative, and it's called Go Mixer by Roland. Go Mixer by Roland. If you look that up, Roland is, of course, the big manufacturer for all things keyboards and audio and sound, professional gear. So they have a Go Mixer, and it actually allows you to mix 5 different channels at one time. So you could have a keyboard running through it and 4 microphones and do your praise team just with the Go Mixer and stream online. Some people are doing it or using it like that. So the Go Mixer is a really great solution. And then, okay, so that's rehearsal. So rehearsal, the choir director is going to run rehearsal with he or she on their keyboard, playing the parts, running the line through iRead. That's a good way to go, or a Go Mixer. Okay. And the people who are listening, the choir members, have their computers muted. You don't want to hear them. They just need to be able to hear you. Now, the only way you can really figure out what people are doing is by using, hold up, I'm in a, see, I got kids. I got small kids and they just want to know what I'm doing. Sorry. So the only way you can really judge what your choir members are really doing is by them recording themselves. Depending on how many people, this might be something. I'm just trying to help some of you because we have pastors on the line. If you want to let them know what you're doing, if they're like, why am I still paying you? You can say, well, Pastor, I got a recording from 30 people and I've been going through those recordings and I've been emailing them and telling what parts they need to fix. Make yourself useful, figure it out, do something, right. So that's a good way to judge what they're doing. Now, so that's kind of rehearsals. The second side of it is, of course, performances. So for the virtual choirs, let me just give you a few tips. I have a company called whaty'alldoing.com, whaty'alldoing.com. We actually produce virtual choir videos. We kind of take you through the whole process. But if you don't even want to hire my company, let me just take you through a few checklists for doing your virtual choir videos. One, you have to understand you're using 2 devices. Okay, device 1 is your playback device. Device 2 is your video recording device. Okay, when you're doing a virtual choir, you have to use those 2 devices. Now, this is something I do with my company. And hopefully they're just only choir directors and pastors on here because I don't want the members to know this secret. This is the secret sauce. Just keep it between us. So what I do is I have what you call video singers and audible singers. The video singers are singing for the video, but I don't want their audio at all. Because think about it, most of our choir members are codependent on people around them, right? They have to hear the good singer behind them or the good 2 singers next to them, right? And choir directors, we know how to put people in a specific spot to make them sing good, depending on where they're standing. Well, if you're at home, you don't have that. So what you got to do, you're thinking performance now. Forget rehearsal. We talk about performance. For performance sake, you have to make sure that those video singers are singing for the video recording. But in that final product, they're muted out. Goodbye. Okay. Now, the audible singers typically make up between 20 to 30% of your choir. Hopefully, you've done good enough job as a choir director to make sure that 20% of your people sound good. So if you have 100 people, you should at least have 20 to 30 people who are fine by themselves to sing their part. And another caveat, make sure that when you do virtual choir videos right now, start off with songs you already know. Don't try to go out, like I heard my dad is a pastor and they say, never drive a new horse to the Kentucky Derby. That's perfect for this. You want to make sure that y'all sing a song you already know. So 20% of your choir knows it. And what they're going to do, check this out. They're the audible singers. So what they do is I set up what it's called a slate track. And basically a slate track has the click with the song. So let's just say you're doing Total Praise. Lord, I will live, right? And that click is keeping everybody together in time. Now, what's happening is the video singer is singing with no headphones. And they're just singing. Why? Because I want to hear their track for the video editor. I want the video editor to get those clicks, because the video editor takes those clicks and can sync them up and line them up right together. Meaning a video editor can take 30 videos at one time, figure out where those clicks are, and they all align right away. That's what a professional video editor can do. But you got to make sure that the click is being recorded. Now, for the audible singers, it's different. The people who you want their voice in the final product, what they're doing is very different. They're singing with headphones, okay? So they got the playback in their first device that's playing back the music. They're using their headphones. Their other device is sitting in front of them, is mounted in front of them. They're with their video recording. And, you know, they might have one ear out. It's good to have one ear out so you can really, you know, hear how you sound as you record. And when they record, now the track is playing in their ears. So the track is not being picked up, or it's being faintly picked up maybe by the other earbud, but it's not bad enough to where it's going to mess up their recording. Now what I can do is I can take that person's voice, put it in my final edit, and just do a little bit of mixing and editing to make it sound good. And now we're good to go. But this is the key of that. The key is that for that audible singer, if you want to keep their voice, okay, stick with me. If you want to keep this person's voice, they're going to have to play back the audio in their headphones. But two, with the slate track that I set up, and this is what you need to do as well. Even if you don't call me and hire me, do it yourself. Make sure that you give them a clap point for your video editor. So you have to tell them, like what I say in the track, like let's say it's total praise, right? So the dun, 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 So in that intro, I'm talking to them. I'm saying, okay, here we go. When I say clap, I want you to clap. 1, 2, 3, 4, clap. Okay, let's try it again. Here we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4, clap. So I get 2 claps from the singers. That way, if they were off tempo the first time, they probably got it on the second one. And I have my video editor sync with that second clap. So all those audible singers are able to be lined up with the second clap coming from, you know, their recording. So the main thing is you don't want the track played in the recording for the audible singers, but for the video singers, it doesn't matter, because all you're going to be doing is syncing up those clicks.
Wow. So for those people who thought that this was a simple process, not quite. Someone said it's almost like recording a CD. And again,
at home.
Right,
remotely.
right, remotely, yes. And the timing that it takes to do that is quite involved. But if you are interested, then whatyalldoing.com is where you can find his information. That should be in the chat. Someone's typing that in the chat. And so feel free to do that. So we're getting ready to wrap it up. I have specific questions for the pastors. And I think this is a really good one. How can you impress upon a pastor who isn't into technology that a new way of worship has to become the new normal? This says until the pandemic is over. So a person that, you know, not into Zoom, not into conference calls, how do we address that? Bishop Silver, Reverend Armstrong, whoever wants to go first. Okay, Reverend Armstrong.
One of the things is it just takes some encouragement. Every pastor needs a pastor. And I called my pastor to find out what my pastor was going to do once this pandemic hit. And he didn't know. So I simply sat down and said, guess what? You can do something. And it was just a word of encouragement. I gave him some basic information of how to do freeconferencecall.com, which was unfamiliar to him. Walked him through the steps, and he was able to get the word to his people about the number, and he was on freeconferencecall.com. And then I encouraged him again. I said, now I've stepped it up. I had older members as you do. We did some training on Zoom. Why don't you join in, learn how to do Zoom? And so it really only took some encouragement by someone who was doing it. And I will tell anyone that we struggled to learn ourselves how to do those basic things. It took some people surrounding me in my ear, encouraging me to step it up. Now all of my musicians now have fancy mics that they're able to record at home. They've gotten a podcast mic for me. All of these things showed me how to hook it up. And so it was just the encouragement of someone along the way. If you encourage them because they love their people, they want their people to continue to be connected to God and to the ministry, encouraging them, I think, is the easiest thing to do, and just simply guide sheets to show them how will get them there.
Excellent. Reverend Silver, Pastor Silver?
Yes, I think it is also important to find out what the pastor's vision is. And I think the reality of understanding that vision, or he or she understanding whether they can really accomplish their vision without the use of technology. If they know that where we are right now, that they need it, they need to be able to answer that question. At least the pastor needs to be able to answer that question. How can I accomplish my vision without the use of technology? And then if I need technology, then who are the people who can speak to that pastor about ways that they can use it to accomplish their purpose, their vision purpose? And I think that's important. And sometimes we have to be careful with that, because you may find out who doesn't have a vision. I guess I'm qualified to say that.
I'm sure some hearts are going up right about now.
Because you must have some kind of vision in order to know what you really need. I was talking Sunday and I said, crisis many times exposes what we really need. We find out what we need versus what we want. And I think it also exposes whether we really have a vision or not, because we don't know what we need or what we need to have, or how we can use what is available to us if we don't have a vision. And I think it's very important for us to be able to articulate that.
Absolutely. And Reverend Armstrong had said earlier about having a strategy. I mean, the whole thing about having a strategy, I have a strategy for everything. I went out today to get some ink for my printer and ended up at Walmart, which I had no intention of going to. And I almost started shopping because I do need from Walmart. And I said, not part of my strategy. Not part of my strategy. So then it kept me on time, because had I stayed in there, there's no telling what the day would have been. So having a strategy, especially when it comes down to the things of God, are so important. We've got to focus on what is it God wants us to be doing anyway.
Right.
In the music ministry, we are here to give honor and praise to God. So even if we're not rehearsing, you still should be singing in the shower. You still should be singing at the sink. If you're a pastor, then this is a great time to connect with other pastors. There are many forums out there where you can connect with other pastors to see what they're doing, to get help. We should be connecting now. One of the things that I have been doing with my church choir, which I need to do more of, is having a Zoom chat. We got to stay connected. We need to stay connected. We can't physically hug and all of that, then we need to at least have this emotional connection. So I think that is just absolutely great information. So that was really it. Dr. McFarland said that they're going to be providing some virtual volunteers. And matter of fact, if you are already online, then you should have your virtual ushers. I have a virtual assistant. They're virtual assistants assisting me right now. They're in the background. I can call them ushers, assistants, but have people that are helping you. So if you're online, do you have PayPal? How are you collecting the offering? There are churches here in Greensboro whose offering has doubled. So they're doing something. They're doing something right. And I think if you're not on Zoom, on Facebook, on conference call, if you're not using technology, you're missing something. I really believe this is the season that God is changing things. Like we talked about this earlier, it's just not normal anymore. And even if tomorrow God eradicated the virus, we still should not return to normal. It should be something different. We should have learned something and gone through something significant that caused us to be better and caused us to look at, okay, why were we doing that in the first place? And what happened 50 years ago, you probably should be doing something a little bit different. And that doesn't mean, and I'm not saying speaking against traditions, because I love traditions, but not all of them work and not all of them are necessary. So I'm not sure where I was going with all that, but there you go. Listen, people, it has been an incredible night. Bishop Bingham had to go, and I knew that. And Professor Abia, they all send their love, and they said this was incredible information for them. So we just have to continue the conversation with one another. HBCUs, watch out. Somebody, I know somebody already is going to call you. Hint, hint. You probably know who I'm talking about. So yeah, so we need to continue this great conversation. I ask that you leave your questions and your comments. I don't plan to have another one next week, but there's some rumbling. I'm told that musicians and singers want to talk. So we will probably see about having a conversation just with them. I don't know. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to offer them. I appreciate each one of you. You have provided valuable information. I will also share with you in the comments, we are posting contact information. There's also AJ, the CEO, who helps churches with virtual technology in terms of, how do you get on Zoom? What kind of cameras you need? So he does all of that. So his information is in the chat. We also have Dr. Arnold, Entity Strategy Group. You can see their information in the comments. Reach out to these people. You have resources right here. I have provided this platform, so you have resources. Please go and like my page, Life with Val D. On that page will be some of the resources that if you missed tonight, I will actually put them there. Anybody else have any parting words, anything you want to share, any last thoughts?
I do want to say something,
yes.
Dr. Johnson, about that question for the pastors, like to make that technological transition. With now us you having streaming, we have real data. If you're using a real streaming platform, you have data. And even with the Entity Consultant Group here, I saw that Alana had that on her description of what she does, that she's a big data analyst. That's very important right now, because you can tell a pastor, hey, we can keep doing it this way, but the data is telling us all this over here that we're missing. And when you talk about churches that are doubling their tithes, I mean, that's happening across the board. Almost, it seems like every healthy church that knows how to shift is doing really well right now. But the churches that are not shifting will get left in the dust. I know that's kind of hard, and I tend to be too objective. So I'm probably not the best person to talk to the pastor, but that's a good way to kind of give them insight, saying, listen, pastor, the data is showing us that it took you 47 minutes to start preaching. We had too much stuff before you preached, and we lost 22% of the people who are watching. Had you preached 20 minutes earlier, we would have had better offerings at the end. Now, I know I'm not trying to make it too carnal, but that's the truth. I mean, the data tells you everything. If you're doing all your missional stuff up front and you're doing too many songs, there's a such thing as too much music on streaming. People don't get on a streaming platform to hear your choir just sing all of these songs that you think are so great, because the online world, it doesn't translate as well, So don't do as much music. That's my only tip. Just get the pastor up as soon as possible, because he's the main attraction to people getting on the stream.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Dr. McFarland.
I was just going to kind of piggyback off of what Ms. Roy was saying. I've been doing some technical ushering, if you want to call it that. And one thing I would like to mention is that as we evolve our worship into this virtual world, the worship space is not the same. So what you were doing before with, hey, my order of service and how that flowed, now as what used to be a minister of music, I have evolved that to a minister of worship arts. I've been saying that for a few years. Your minister of music has to create a worship experience that's virtual now. It's not just the music, it's how it appeals to the person looking at it, how it draws them in, which is the same thing that you would do in the service. So it's more than just getting the equipment there and putting the camera on go. So a new skill set that your minister of music now has to step into is evolving that whole virtual worship experience. And when we get back in the churches, that piece has to remain, as well as what you would do in the service, and how it appeals to the eye is different. So you have to go back and look at what you're doing and how it comes across the screen. And what he said about the data is very important.
That's excellent. And if you have young people in your church, now is the time to engage them because they know technology. Yeah. They know technology. This is the time to engage them. When I'm at school, sometimes I'm trying to figure out something, Dr. Taylor, and I am like, student, come, can you help me with this? You know, right. So they know it. So this is a great time to establish your youth technology team. So I definitely encourage it. Anybody else have any last parting words?
Could I say something about accepting the real challenge of dealing with the hard things? I heard Dr. Thompson say tonight, and I heard it very clear, that this is not just on recitation or singing. She said breathing. She said breathing. And we have a tendency, like the people who have been going to the beach, to just disregard what we hear and what we understand and strategize around what we feel and what we like. I've heard ever since this started, a whole lot of people say, well, God has not given us the spirit of fear. Well, let's deal with the rest of it, but he's given us a sound mind. And I think we need to use that mind so we can deal with our strategies.
Now that's excellent. That's excellent. So I hope people heard that. Deal with the entire scripture, not just the first part of it. Please. Anyone else? Well,
I do want to say, can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Real quick.
Yes.
My mother-in-law just texted me and she said something that's really powerful. She said, talk about licensing. That's all I want to say. With music, it's a whole nother world now. And preachers, pastors need to hear this too. You don't want to plagiarize nobody's sermon online because it's easy to trace. Even if you get off that stream, there's technology to record what's happening on Facebook Live, even if you pull it off. Same thing with music. It's very important that you go to CCLI or onelicense.net. You want to get those streaming licenses, because if you're not on those, you know, they say you shouldn't say whitelisting, but there is like an underground whitelisting for Facebook. If your church does not have a CCLI license, then most likely there's a Facebook algorithm that's tracing audio signals, and it can trace whether the song is covered under CCLI. And if you don't have the CCLI license, you're in double trouble. But even if you have CCLI, make sure that the song that you're singing on Sunday is covered by CCLI and it's actually a number for it. Because even with having CCLI, that's not a blanket license over all music in the church. Because a lot of publishers don't do their due diligence and register their songs with CCLI. So we've heard how churches' streams are getting shut down or getting flagged. If you get flagged 3 times, you will never stream on Facebook again. So I just want to make sure, licensing is very important. Be mindful of CCLI and onelicense.net, because those can be powerful resources for you right now.
Yes, CCLI and what is the other one called?
Onelicense.net.
Onelicense.net. Yes, mm-hmm. Yes, people, please tend to those license. That's very important. I used to be a minister of music at a church, and that was one of my duties. I had to get that, put that payment in so that we would be covered. Mm-hmm. So we're in a different world now, and with technology, they can pick it up. And yes, artists want to be paid. So Yes, Dr. Johnson-Thompson.
Yes. One last quick thing. I want to thank Bishop Silver for bringing the breathing point up, but I want to make sure that all of you know that I merely repeated CDC. Okay, it's not my idea, even though I believe it, but it's on the CD website. Okay, so that's very authentic.
Dr. Taylor, thank you. Dr. Armstrong, thank you. Dr. McFarland, thank you. Bishop Silver, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Johnson-Thompson, you know you're the real MVP. People are really giving you hearts tonight, as they are our panelists, but they are loving you. Minister Roy Cotton, thank you so much. Alana Crossler, thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful evening. I hope you keep this conversation going. Please show this to your pastors, to your music teams. I've been told that people were hosting watch parties with their churches. So whatever you have to do to get this information out, please go forth. Thank you all. Please, again, go to Life with Val D and like the page. Again, I will be posting some of the information that you're receiving tonight in that page. And I hope that God will continue to bless all of us. Have a good night and thank you.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless you.